back to another game changing episode of AiBiz. I'm your host Avik, and today's episode is specially for the underdogs, the underestimated, and the ones who's been told it's impossible. Because today's guest is living proof that success doesn't require permission, it demands perseverance. And joining me is Aidan Sowa. So, welcome to the show, Aidan.
Yeah, good to be on, Avik.
Lovely, lovely. So, dear listeners, before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you with Aidan. So, Aidan is a powerhouse entrepreneur who turned debt, doubt, and dead ends into multiple thriving businesses. So, he's the founder of Zoto Dialer, a smart, high performance outbound calling platform helping sales teams scale faster. So he also leads Sowa Marketing Agency, one of the top PR and podcast booking firms for the entrepreneurs, and a data company that advises businesses on scaling, branding, and even going public. So from facing mountains of debt to being featured in the Forbes and USA Today, Aidan's story is not just about building businesses, but it's all about building the belief when nobody else does. So if you are someone chasing a dream that others can't see it, then stick around because this conversation is for you. So I'll not take much of your time, dear listeners. Let's get started. Welcome to the show again, Aidan.
Yeah, great to be on.
Amazing. So either I want to start there. Like when you were buried in debt and didn't have a clear way out, what actually kept you going when most people would have just given up?
I mean, for me, the biggest thing is like I don't want to ever have to like declare bankruptcy or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
So that's a pretty strong motivation. But beyond that,
Mm.
it's just the right thing to do to pay down your debts and stuff, at least in my eyes. So I'll find a way to be able to do stuff like that if there were like any types of issues.
Okay.
Um, so that's what kept me going and stuff. I do know
Mm.
several people who essentially declared bankruptcy and stuff like that in such environments, which is totally understandable.
Mhm.
But I figured I could persevere and stuff like that. I guess you could
Mm.
call it almost like confidence, like potentially misplaced confidence, but nonetheless they had a certain confidence that I could get through any type of situation.
Okay.
And that got me lucky, like, a couple of times, like, one time, for example, I was, like, in a lot of debt, and I was able I just really searched, and, like, within a couple of days, I was able to get a deal for, like, around $20,000, and that really helped in terms of, like, eliminating the debt. So, there's been several situations like that in the past, which I've been able to just think of creative ways because, at least for me, when I'm in difficult situations, I can usually think pretty creatively outside of the box, and that's one of the key things is being able to think outside the box in terms of how do you do things in terms of like solutions,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of ways you can generate business. It's also thinking about who you know. So as long as you treat your customers right and things like that,
Mhm.
there's often scenarios where they know people who could end up being really high paying
Mm.
customers.
Understood. Okay. So okay, and here if I have to say it's like was there a particular mindset shift or maybe a aha moment that really turned the tide for you?
I mean, I would just say it's just persevering, through
Mhm.
these difficult situations and stuff like that,
Okay.
and, I mean, there were definitely some really big downs for me.
Mhm.
For example, when I lost, like, around, like, $14,000 or so in a single day from, like, a scam, that was, like, a really big down
Mhm.
day or whatever. I didn't really do much that particular day. However, what I, eventually persevered was for me,
Mhm.
like, my company goes beyond just myself. I
Mhm.
have to be able to pay, employees and stuff like that.
Mm.
So I would say rather than like almost like an aha moment, it's more so like my duty and obligation I feel that I have to have towards my employees to make
Mm.
sure they get paid and they survive. And I almost prioritize that over my own. So, that was my biggest motivation to just, like, really push through and find a way, to solve that situation.
Okay, okay, got it. And like, I mean, it's really crazy how sometimes when the world counts us out, that's exactly we discover. Like when we discover that what we really made of. It's like hitting rock bottom gave you the blueprint to rebuild stronger. So yeah, yeah. So you have built multiple companies now, Zoto Dialer, Sowa Marketing Agency, and your data company. So how do you
Mhm.
decide like what opportunities to pursue? Like especially when so many entrepreneurs get stuck chasing everything.
I mean, I think it's all about, like, sticking to something. If you stick to something for a long enough period of time and you are willing to innovate, that's, like, the
Mm,
key word, like, innovation,
yeah.
then you can often become very successful. There's no guarantee in anything in terms of business or in terms of any aspect of life. However, what I've noticed is a lot of business owners,
Mm,
especially newer business owners, it's like some sort of new trend where they think like business is very easy and they believe that you
mm,
only have to walk a few hours a day and that's all they're willing to do. Unfortunately, from my experience at least, that's not the case in business. And you got to really walk many hours, at least in the first few years, to really get to that point where you can have a very
mm,
consistent stream of income coming in. And so if you look at it from that perspective, from like a 10-year game plan versus like, oh, 1 or 2 years in, I'm gonna make many millions, then it's much easier to make decisions because then you're making decisions on like a yearly basis. We want to hit these targets. And sometimes people set, in my opinion, very unrealistic and pointless goals for themselves. You only really need to grow as a company around like 20% on a yearly basis. And over time, the company will grow to massive levels.
mm,
So it's just about consistent growth rather than like huge ups, huge downs, and stuff like that.
mm,
So not worrying so much about like having like 100% growth. Well, I mean, that's
mm,
very doable, obviously, within like that first year or so of business. But what beyond that, 20% growth is actually pretty good, if you
mm.
continuously do that over time. If you're willing to stick it in for, like, 10 plus years, the company will be extremely valuable within a 10-year time frame.
True, amazing. And also here, if I have to say, like, and early on, how did you deal with people doubting your decisions or questioning your vision?
I mean, I feel like people have always doubted me in certain situations, so that was nothing new in that regard, but, uh,
Hmm.
so for me, I was just kind of used to a certain extent. I feel like people doubted me in regards to numerous aspects of my life, but in regards to like outside of business, when it comes to like chess and other things that I've done. So that wasn't that shocking to me. So I just kind of persevered and pushed through it and just kind of ignored those opinions, even though certain people were very skeptical of what I was doing and some of the
Mm,
paths which I was going down and stuff. People were claiming I was going down a bad path and all this stuff. And I think the ultimate thing is that it's okay to listen to other voices and stuff, but you have to really focus on yourself because nobody knows you to the same level which you know yourself
mm,
in most cases. So sometimes people look out from like an outside picture and they have your best interest in mind. However, it can actually be quite damaging if you spend a lot of time like really like focusing on like a ton of negative voices and stuff like that because it can drag you down and give you limiting beliefs. For example, for like the longest time, like I truly believed it was impossible for me to ever make like
mm,
$10,000 in a month. I just
mm,
truly believed it was like an impossible thing. And then I just had to break through that particular thinking, that particular mentality. And it was through various
mm,
courses and stuff like that where I was able to learn to break through that particular line of thinking because and I feel like this impacts a lot of people. It's not even
yeah.
necessarily like the business growth. It's almost like a mental limits you set on
Mm,
yourself because that's all they are. They're just limits. In business, you could be a very successful if you so choose to be. It's often just like your own mental limits. Like sometimes people don't take
mm,
the actions they know they should be taking because they're almost like afraid that they're going to break that reality, break
Mm,
that past self. And so you gotta be willing to do uncomfortable things. And I would say another key aspect is really focusing not just on your yearly goals, but also on your monthly and daily goals. So many people I know, they at the beginning of the year, they set some crazy yearly goal, they don't hit it, and then they just stop doing all types of goals until next year. And you just
mm,
gotta kind of take things slowly, have monthly goals, have daily goals, etc. And if you don't meet them, be willing to adjust and keep setting goals like every single day. um, that's really just, and pretty much the funny thing is that almost every successful entrepreneur I've met more or less does
mm,
this, and then almost every unsuccessful one doesn't. So it's
mm.
an interesting correlation.
Got it. Yeah. Huh. And I have to say that like I love that because clarity is a superpower and turning out that noise, that's almost a business strategy itself. So yeah.
Yep.
And scaling a company really sometimes sounds awesome, but the messy middle is where a lot of business fall apart. So what were some of the hardest scaling challenges you faced and um, how did you push through?
Well, I pushed through in a number of different ways. For one, it's just, being able to view the different obstacles. So, for example, certain
Mm,
channels of marketing, like such as email marketing and stuff like that, were not working for us for like a decent period of time. So, willing to look for alternatives and learn from your mistakes. So, like my mistake
mm,
there was relying on too much on one particular channel to generate business. So then I adjusted. I'm like, okay, so now we have to add LinkedIn. We got to add other types of lead generation to our actual funnel in order to keep the business alive. So being able to adjust to your mistakes, because the only thing worse than like,
mm,
having a mistake, in my opinion, is making mistakes multiple times in a
mm,
row. And that's very common, especially for people just getting started in your business, is to make the same mistake multiple times. And you want to avoid that. You want to make the mistake, you'd be like, okay, write it down, and then like you figure out what caused the mistake, and then move on. If you just keep doing that over time, then you'll get progressively better and better and better. And you just gotta keep improving yourself in that regard. It's not nothing like really that crazy and stuff. And one thing which I've noticed is the types of people who make a lot of money often are not that different from you, other than they improve their mental thinking and were willing to expand their knowledge, whether it's through books, whether it's through like different courses. There's so many different ways you can go about doing that.
sure. Yep. And if you could go back and whisper advice to early stage Aidan, then what would you tell him about scaling smart?
I would probably I mean, early on, I didn't really know too much about, like, marketing. I would have
Mhm,
just focused, initially speaking, on doing massive scale. So, I didn't understand at the time when I was first starting a business that half the game is just volume. You just gotta do tons of volume in terms of outreach. So, like, my company, we reach out to hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis. And it's just a volume game. You just need to get in
mm,
front of enough people. So at the very least, at least in like in most businesses, you need to get in front of like at least 1,000 people on a daily basis. And
mm,
there's so many ways you could go about doing that. Could be through ads, it could be through email marketing, it could be through so many methods. But just posting in Facebook groups or just commenting on stuff, that's not real effort, and it's really hard to scale a business that way unless you're running like an e-commerce company or something like that.
mm,
But for like a lot of businesses, you need to do massive outreach, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's on email and stuff like that. You just got to do more. And that's like half the battle is just being consistent
mm,
and doing massive volume. Because over time, if you're consistent doing massive volume, I remember I talked to one of my early mentors in regards to this. It's nearly impossible to not make money. Like,
mm,
I remember I reached a point where eventually, it was like money was flowing in, I wasn't even trying because I was doing that much outreach. It was just like it was
mm,
hard to do, like, I'd be, like, trying to, like, be on
mm.
vacation, people would be like, "Hey, I wanna pay you money," and stuff like that. So it's like money was chasing you versus the other way around. So once you get to a certain level of like volume, then
Mm,
it just kind of falls into place in a way. And then you obviously have to come up with other stuff like how to hire, how to create systems and stuff, and then go beyond systems and stuff like that. How to get your employees to people think on their own and solve problems themselves without having to ask you for every little thing, stuff like
mm,
that.
exactly. Wow. Amazing. So also like if I have to say like um uh, you have seen firsthand like how critical execution is. Like ideas are everywhere, but execution is rare. What daily habits or rituals actually help you stay focused and consistent while building against the odds?
I would say just focusing on the bigger picture,
Okay.
focusing on like the long term goals and like why I'm even doing this to begin with. Because so many people like they start a business because I don't know they think it sounds cool or something like that, but they don't have a real reason why and why they're trying to grow a business or their why isn't strong enough. It has to be a very strong reason because
Mm,
for most people in business, it's gonna be, like, extremely difficult moments, and if you don't have a strong why, then, then you'll essentially break.
mm. Okay. All right. Hmm. Amazing. So, I mean, your journey is definitely incredible reminder that failure is never final unless we quit. And for anyone who is listening who feels stuck, overwhelmed, or underestimated, let this episode be your permission slip to dream bigger and execute harder. And you don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need to believe enough to take this next step. So go check out Zoto Dialer. And if you're ready to scale smarter, check out Sowa Marketing Agency for building serious visibility and follow Aidan's journey for pure inspiration on turning doubt into domination. So thank you so much, everyone.